I'm here with Alexander Mercouris, editor-in-chief of the Duran. Alexander, let's do another update on what's going on with Assange. This story is actually made exclusive via the Duran, via yourself, and it deals with Assange and some of the past media coverage that has been complete fake news regarding Assange. So why don't you get into this story and just let our viewers know what's going on here?
Indeed. Can I just explain what this is all about? I mean, one of the major things that has been used to criticize and, in fact, to smear Julian Assange, who, let us all remember, is in Belmarsh prison, where he is being held by the British in, frankly, appalling conditions, pending a decision on whether or not to extradite him to the United States on espionage charges. But one of the constant things that's been used to sort of undermine Julian Assange's reputation, to tarnish his reputation, and which unfortunately, to my knowledge, has worked with many people, is the suggestion that Julian Assange has some kind of relationship or connection to the Russians. And this story was then given an added weight a few months ago by The Guardian, which is this newspaper we have in Britain, this sort of so-called liberal centre-left newspaper, which has in effect turned very strongly against Assange. And The Guardian published this extraordinary story that there was a plot whilst Julian Assange was in the Ecuadorian embassy. The Ecuadorians, that, if we all remember, granted Assange asylum, and he took refuge in their embassy until eventually the new Ecuadorian government arranged with the British for the British police to go into the embassy and to arrest him there, which was contrary to international law. But no, that's another story. But there is this story that The Guardian published, that the previous Ecuadorian government and the consul, the Ecuadorian consul, who is a man called Fidel Narvaez, the Ecuadorian consul in London, had come to some kind of arrangement with the Russians, the Russian authorities, that there was some kind of plot instigated by the Russians to smuggle Assange out of the Ecuadorian embassy and to take him to the Russian embassy and thence to Russia. There were sensational headlines in The Guardian about this, and it was all spoken about in a sort of James Bondian fashion, as some sort of devious plot with presumably Assange in some kind of disguise being smuggled out of the embassy in some mysterious way and taken to the Russian embassy in London, in some sort of covert fashion. At least that was the impression that the headlines to the story gave. Now, we did a video about this, in which we absolutely ridiculed the story. We said that it was completely impossible. Anyway, what I've now learned is that Fidel Narvaez, as I said, the Ecuadorian consul who was in charge at that time, he brought a complaint to the Scott Trust. The Scott Trust is this charitable fund which provides most of the funding that keeps The Guardian going. He brought a complaint to the Scott Trust about the story. He said that the story is complete nonsense, that the Ecuadorians had considered the possibility of giving Assange some kind of diplomatic status as a way of getting him out of the embassy in a way that the British would not, be able to interfere with. But they didn't actually pursue this plan when it was clear that the British would not respect Assange's diplomatic status, and that the Russians had no role in any of this at all, and that they were not involved, and this was not their idea in any way or fashion. Anyway, the Scott Trust has examined and reviewed this complaint, and it has upheld the complaint. It has accepted that the Guardian story was fundamentally misleading and gave a distorted view of what happened. Now, that is extremely unusual. I understand that the Scott Trust has only upheld about, a very small number of complaints against the Guardian. You could almost count them on your fingers. In fact, I believe you can count them on your fingers. So this is almost a most remarkable instance of the fund that finances the Guardian actually upholding a complaint against the Guardian. And I think it's an important story because what it shows is that so much of the media coverage of Julian Assange is so completely wrong. He is not a Russian agent in any shape or form. He has no connection to the Russians. The Russians don't see him as one of their assets. They're not trying to help him in any way. And most of these stories that you read, in fact, all of these stories that you read, which argue the opposite, are simply baseless and are untrue. On this occasion, this complaint has been upheld. This story has been found to be untrue and distorted, and apparently the Guardian has been instructed by the Scott Trust to make corrections and to basically admit that the whole story was wrong. So we will see what happens. But I just mentioned this. It's a short incident to, episode to bring out, and I want to, say that anything you read about Assange and anything that you see that connects Assange to Russia, you should take with extreme skepticism. There is no connection between Julian Assange and Russia. The Russians and Julian Assange have no contacts, official or otherwise, with each other.
2 questions to end the video, Alexander. Number 1 is a quick one. Who wrote this story? And number 2, this story sounds to me like it was a setup, it was a plant.
Yeah.
Because you had to get stories back then that connected Assange to Russia, however ridiculous or fake they were,
yes,
because it bolstered the entire Russiagate, Russia meddled in the elections, DNC server hacks, Podesta server hacks, all this fake news that was being, pushed out
yes,
at that time in order to create that connection that WikiLeaks was an arm of the Kremlin, was some sort of news agency propaganda hacking arm of the Kremlin. So all these stories
yes,
had a purpose and they were deliberate. Is that a correct assessment? So the question, who wrote the story? And then what do you think about what I just said?
Right. I mean, the person who wrote the story, there were several journalists involved, but for me, always the key one is Luke Harding, who clearly has Russia on the brain. He's got a sort of absolutely paranoid view about the country, in my opinion. He is also a massive champion of Christopher Steele, and he's probably the last person on earth who still believes that there is some value to Christopher Steele's bizarre dossier, which we now know even the primary source that was responsible for it says, it was just the work of, a couple of guys chatting with each other over a couple of beers in a bar. But Luke Harding, apparently still
the
believes
last man on earth that believes
the last man on earth who believes in Christopher Steele. And of course, he's also written a very weird book, largely based on the dossier, which is called Collusion, in which he completely accepts the whole story about, Donald Trump being somehow involved in some kind of conspiracy with the Russians. Again, it's a very bizarre book. And if you really want to see, how odd, how weird Luke Harding's views are, there's actually a rather good interview with Aaron Mate in which he's just absolutely shredded. So you can find that on YouTube somewhere. But so Luke Harding, unsurprisingly, is one of the authors of this thing. But also, it has to be said that the source of these stories, as you see if you read the decision that the Scott Trust has made, which I have done, is that it comes from anonymous sources, our old friends, the anonymous sources. We have no idea who these people are, but I have to say I must assume that they're part of the intelligence world.
Brennan, Comey, Clapper,
whoever, or their equivalent. Indeed, or their equivalents. Indeed, or their equivalents in London. So it's our old friends, the intelligence sources, who spun who spun this thing. As I said, a genuine Ecuadorian idea about, granting Assange some sort of diplomatic status as a means of getting him out perfectly legally and openly out of the embassy was then spun into some sort of weird, James Bond style plot to smuggle him to the Russian embassy and thence to Russia. I mean, crazy stuff. The sort of thing that doesn't happen in the real world, except presumably in the minds of The Guardian and of Luke Harding, who, I'm sorry to say this, seems to be a sucker for these kind of things.
Alexander Mercouris, editor-in-chief of the Duran. Thank you very much. Guys, if you like this video, click the subscribe button down below. Click on that notifications bell to make sure you get notifications when we publish a new video. Find us on iTunes and on Soundcloud to get an audio copy of this video. And please donate to us on PayPal, Patreon, and Subscribestar. Your donation really helps us out a lot. Look for our videos on duranvideo.com and bitchute.com as well. And download the Telegram app, where you can follow the Duran and be updated on everything the Duran community does, as well as our DRN20 coupon deal, which gets you 20% off everything on the duranshop.com. Just put that DRN20 code at checkout and you'll get 20% off, Alexander.
Well, you'll get of items like this, our famous Duran magic mugs, which are so beautiful and so amazing and so magnificent and so marvelous to hold and so extraordinary to drink from. This one with the coat of arms of the city of Moscow. You see the double-headed eagle, the Russian double-headed eagle there, with St. George slaying the dragon. He's the patron saint of Moscow. As I've said many times, I usually drink tea from mine, but I've also drunk coffee from them. My wife drinks hot chocolate from them. I've also once drank champagne. And on Christmas Day, which is shortly coming, I intend to drink gin and tonic from mine too. Now, there is a story behind that. Ian knows what it is. I will reveal all shortly. But amazing Duran mugs. I've had this one for almost a year now. You see how pristine it is. It's been drunk from scores of hundreds of times. There's not a chip on it, not a flake on it. Is beautifully made, and the coat of arms of Moscow looks perfect. There's no discoloration, no loss of color, nothing. These are amazing mugs. I mean, they really are phenomenal mugs, and we've got lots of them. Alex has, expanded and refreshed our range. You will find them all on our store, and you will also find amazing shirts, like the T-shirt I'm wearing now, 100% cotton, beautifully fits beautifully, beautifully made, with the Duran double-headed eagle there, which is different from the Moscow one or the Russian one. We have it because it looks east and west, and of course it's the eagle which flies over the world, so it does that, very well. And we also have long sleeve T-shirts, and we've got our amazing polo shirts. My polo shirts are now all packed away for my trip to the Alps, which I'm taking very shortly, when my wife and I are going to go skiing with our dogs. So we've got amazing shirts, polo shirts, long sleeve T-shirts, short sleeve T-shirts, V-neck shirts. We've got hoodies, we've got hats, we've got stickers, all wonderful things, perfect presents. There's still time to buy them for Christmas or for the new year, for your friends and for your family and for yourself. In fact, you can buy them as gifts at any time of year, not just now. DRN20, as Alex says, is the discount code. Help the Duran, help yourself, help your friends. Come along to our shop, buy these great things. Alex will tell you how to do it.
TheDuranShop.com. Alexander Mercouris, editor-in-chief of the Duran. Thank you very much. Until next time, everybody, take care.